The girl went to church for the evening service, but she never showed up there. Her parents started to worry and contacted the police, after which they went out to search for their daughter themselves. Detectives began their investigation and soon uncovered chilling facts that revealed the truth about the fate of this girl. Zoe Hastings was born on November 21, 1996 in Kansas. She was the eldest of 5 children, with 3 younger sisters and a brother. Zoe constantly helped her parents look after them and was always ready to cancel any plans if her parents needed her help. Zoe's parents were deeply religious and spent a lot of time in church with their children. Later, the family moved to Dallas, where Zoe attended a high school with a focus on creativity and art. She loved drawing and also participated in school theater productions. The girl even managed to work at the Dallas Art Studio in her free time from school. Additionally, during the summer holidays, Zoe worked as a lifeguard at the local pool. She graduated from high school with honors, and she had the opportunity to enter the leading universities in the country. However, Zoe planned to take some time off from her education and dedicate some time to her church. In October 2015, when Zoe was 18, she was preparing to go on a trip with her church congregation and was looking forward to it. On Sunday, October 11, she planned to drive to church and attend the Sunday service, where the details of their upcoming trip were to be discussed. Zoe took the family minivan, promised her parents to return for dinner, and left for the church at 4:41 p.m. She was only a few kilometers from her home, and her parents expected their daughter to come home around 6:30. However, the girl did not return for dinner. The parents sent her several messages, but there was no reply. Some time later, they tried to call her, again without success. Then they started calling her friends and acquaintances, thinking that Zoe might have stopped by someone after the service. But none of them saw the girl that evening. Finally, the parents decided to call the church, and here they were met with a very unexpected turn of events. It turned out that Zoe never showed up there. The parents started to worry even more and decided to contact the police. This behavior was completely untypical for their daughter. She always told them where she was going and never stayed out so long without warning. They called 911, but for some reason the officers did not go to their home to take a missing person report. Then the parents went to the station, filed a report, and went to look for their daughter. They drove the entire route from home to church several times, checked the neighboring streets, but could not find any trace of Zoe. It continued like this almost all night, and closer to morning, her mother had an idea. She remembered that her daughter had an iPhone tracking app installed, and the parents had access to her geolocation. They discovered that the girl's phone was just a few hundred meters from the church, near a stream across the road from it. The parents immediately drove to this location and, to their horror, saw a large number of police cars, as well as ambulances and rescuers. They approached one of the officers and said they were looking for their daughter, and he informed them that there had been a car accident here. Some time ago, the police received a call from a witness who was walking his dog near this place. At some point, a man ran up to him and said that there had been an accident near the stream involving a girl. They both ran to the location, and the witness found her in a pool of blood, after which he called the police. The officers quickly identified the deceased. It was Zoe Hastings. However, it took them just one look to understand. The girl had not died as a result of the accident, but had been murdered. Zoe was found on the ground a few meters from the minivan, which was partially submerged in the stream. There was a lot of blood near her body, and the police saw numerous cuts on her neck. Zoe's parents tried to approach their daughter, but the officers stopped them. They said that they should not see this monstrous sight. The police also noticed that the girl's dress was pulled up, and her underwear was pulled down. From this, they concluded that the murderer had likely sexually assaulted her. The crime scene examination gave the investigators several leads. All the doors of the minivan, except for the driver's, were locked. This could indicate that the vehicle was driven by the perpetrator himself, or that he approached Zoe directly at the scene of the incident. A few meters from the stream, near the embankment under the bridge, the police found a blood-covered knife, which was likely the murder weapon. The victim's smartphone allowed investigators to quickly establish the timeline of events that evening. The geolocation data indicated that Zoe was near the stream at 5:01 p.m., meaning just 20 minutes after leaving home. According to investigators, she was murdered within a few minutes from that moment. The police also found out that after leaving home, Zoe made one stop. She went to a store that had a DVD rental service to return a movie. While experts examined the victim's body and evidence, detectives decided to interview possible witnesses who were in the store or nearby at the same time as Zoe. After talking to dozens of people, they'd managed to find 2 potential witnesses. The first was Lester Clark, who worked at a tattoo parlor near the store. He said that on that day around 4:45 p.m., he went out for cigarettes and saw a girl near the DVD rental service. A little later, Lester saw her returning to the parking lot and approaching a white minivan. The girl started to open the door, but at that moment, a man approached her, stopped the door with his hand, and said something to her. After that, the girl got into the car, moved to the passenger seat, and the man took the driver's seat and they drove away. Lester was shown a photo of Zoe, and he said that the girl indeed resembled her. Although the scene seemed tense to him, he did not give it much importance, as nothing obviously bad happened there. The witness also gave the police a description of this man. He was dark-skinned, of short stature, but very solidly built. Because Lester was standing at a considerable distance from the parking lot, he could not make out the man's facial features. Later, when it was already getting dark, he again noticed this man walking towards the store. The second witness was Gary Whitman, and he shared a similar story. Gary was homeless, and at that time was across the street from the parking lot. Around 4:45 p.m., he saw a young woman heading to a white minivan, and a man immediately approached her from behind, preventing her from getting into the car. He then took something out of his pocket and showed it to the woman, after which she got into the vehicle, moved to the passenger seat, and the man drove away. Gary gave a similar description of the suspect and added that what happened seemed very suspicious to him. Therefore, he went into the store and asked the clerk to call 911. However, it is unknown whether his request was fulfilled. The police found no records of a potential call. While investigators were interviewing witnesses, experts made several discoveries. The medical examiner examined the victim's body and found traces of male biological material. However, there was so little of it that conducting a full DNA analysis was simply impossible. Nevertheless, this confirmed that the perpetrator had sexually assaulted the victim before killing her. Forensic scientists examined the victim's car and could not find any foreign fingerprints on the door or steering wheel. Based on witness statements, the suspect could have independently taken Zoe from the store parking lot in her minivan, so this turn of events also took the detectives by surprise. However, they did not rule out that the killer could have simply wiped the steering wheel and door handles after the deed. Several hairs were also found on Zoe's body, but experts could not extract a full DNA sample from them because they were too small. But when they examined the knife found near the crime scene, they were in for a breakthrough. A DNA sample was found on it, which was immediately uploaded to the FBI database, and the police got a match. The sample belonged to 34-year-old Antonio Cochran. The man had a quite impressive criminal history that stretched back to his teenage years. He was arrested for thefts, assaults, and break-ins, and was suspected in a number of other crimes. A year before these events, in 2014, the 17-year-old daughter of his girlfriend accused Antonio of rape. She claimed that the man offered her a ride, but once she was in the car, Antonio took her to a wooded area, threatening to kill her if she tried to escape. There he assaulted her, after which the man was arrested. He claimed that there was a consensual, intimate relationship between them, and the case went to court. However, during the trial, sufficient evidence of his guilt could not be found, so Antonio was released. After obtaining a DNA match, the police issued a warrant for the man's arrest, and he was soon arrested. During conversations with detectives, Antonio denied any involvement in the murder, so they focused on finding additional evidence. Initially, experts took a sample of his DNA and attempted to compare it with the hair and biological material found on the victim's body. Since both pieces of evidence were too small for a full sample extraction, experts were left with conducting another type of analysis. They could obtain an approximate profile and determine that it definitely does not match the chosen DNA sample. In other words, this method works on the principle of exclusion, but does not provide precise results. They compared these partial profiles from the hair and biological material with the DNA of the suspect and concluded that their similarity could not be excluded. Meanwhile, detectives examined Antonio's smartphone, where they found several interesting messages. Piecing them together, it was evident that on the day of the murder, the man was in a very troubled state. At 1:48 a.m., even before Zoe's death, he texted an acquaintance with whom he lived in the same house, saying he was moving out, and that he would never see him again. At 2:07 p.m., he wrote to his ex-girlfriend, saying that his stepmother, who was like a real mother to him, had died. He clarified that she died right in front of him, and he was struggling to cope with this loss. Over the next hour, Antonio wrote twice to another woman about how he had been drinking all night, driving around the city and crying. These were his last messages before Zoe's death. That same evening at 9:30 p.m., he wrote to his friend, stating that Antonio did not know what to do and that a lot had happened recently that made him feel bad. The next day, he sent another message to his ex-girlfriend, saying his life was over and that she would soon find out everything. Examining the search history in his browser, detectives discovered that before his arrest, Antonio visited local news sites in the crime section more than 30 times, and 5 of those pages were dedicated to Zoe's murder. Prior to all these events, he hardly ever visited news sites. The police found only one page in his history related to criminal cases involving a certain gang. Experts found another clue related to the suspect's smartphone. They requested geolocation data from his mobile operator and found out that at 4:34 p.m. his phone was connected to a tower, the coverage area of which included that very store. This coincided with the time Zoe was there. However, these data could not be considered strong evidence. The information about the connection to towers only indicated that the suspect's phone was within a few kilometers of her. Nonetheless, it suggested that Antonio had arrived in that area just a few minutes before Zoe left the parking lot. His home was quite far away, and during the day, his phone was connected to a different tower near it. Detectives also found out that the man had started a new job at a grocery store 3 days before the incident. On Monday, the day after the murder, he did not show up for his shift without any explanation. Despite the police being able to compile this significant list of indirect leads against Antonio, the only strong piece of evidence remained the suspect's DNA on the knife handle. This could pose a problem. Often, such evidence is not enough to convict, as merely holding a knife does not prove the act of murder. For instance, he could have used the knife under different circumstances, after which someone else could have used it to commit the crime. Nonetheless, investigators were unable to find any other evidence and decided to take the case to court. According to the prosecution's version of events, when Zoe was returning to her car in the parking lot, Antonio approached her, pulled a knife from his pocket, and threatened to make her get into the car, after which he himself got behind the wheel. Relying on the messages sent by the suspect before the murder, he was in a severe emotional state due to a relative's death and had consumed a large amount of alcohol. According to investigators' version, he decided to kidnap the girl with the intention of assaulting her. He chose Zoe at random, as she was in the parking lot at the time, and Antonio simply saw an opportunity to commit the crime. He took her to the stream, which was located in a depression and surrounded by trees, making this area hidden from all sides. There he forced the victim out of the car, assaulted her, and inflicted 6 stab wounds to her neck. Then he got back into the car and attempted to submerge it in the stream, possibly to hide any remaining evidence inside. However, the car only partially sank, so theoretically, Antonio could have wiped the steering wheel and door handles of his fingerprints and fled the scene. Based on the first witness's statement, that evening, he saw a similar man returning on foot to the store's parking lot. The defense argued that the vast majority of evidence could hardly even be considered circumstantial. For example, the partial analysis of the hair and biological material only indicated that Antonio could not be excluded from the list of those to whom these samples belonged, but did not prove actual ownership. Regarding the DNA on the knife, the defense latched onto the fact that this evidence does not prove the act of murder itself. According to their version, Antonio could have touched the knife under different circumstances. Before working at the grocery store, he worked at a cinema, and sometimes, according to him, he had to clean up various items left in the halls, including knives. However, it was not possible to confirm such a version. Moreover, if someone else took the knife from the cinema and used it to commit the murder, they would have had to somehow not erase Antonio's DNA sample from the handle, which seemed like a very difficult task. The defense also tried to dispute the credibility of the second witness, the homeless Gary. It turned out that there was an arrest warrant out for him because he violated the terms of his early release. The lawyers tried to use this fact to exclude his story from the case materials, but the prosecution objected. In their view, the fact that a person with an active arrest warrant voluntarily contacted the police indicated that he indeed wanted to help. Gary himself stated that he simply tried to do the right thing, realizing that this would lead to his arrest. Antonio's lawyers also tried to convince the jury that at the time of Zoe's murder, their client was elsewhere, helping a friend, but no serious evidence of this version was presented. Initially, the prosecution wanted to seek the death penalty for Antonio, but during the trial, it became clear that it would be quite problematic with the available evidence, so they abandoned those plans. At the end of the trial, the jury struggled to reach a unanimous decision, but eventually, Antonio was found guilty of murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Zoe's parents thanked the investigators and all participants of the process for achieving justice for the criminal. Her father also shared that he had always spoken to all his children about the dangers that this world could pose to them. The man did everything in his power to protect them, but his eldest daughter was abducted just a few hundred meters from their home, and he couldn't do anything about it.